Welcome all! Today I'm going to be showing you my generic wave spawner asset pack. This will be listed for sale on Fab, and basically, as you can see here, it spawns waves of enemies with the parameters that you have set up, and just handles that. It has pooling, so it pools based on your maximum alive. So basically, it's pulling all these enemies out of the pool. And the enemies are set up as character classes here. They have a bleed, and we have boss phases incrementally on the 10th wave. So you can see here that it's just kind of running. We can see our FPS. Hopefully you can see that over there. It's not really dropping. Of course, these are basic shapes, but you can see the general idea here. Not that you're ever going to have that many enemies alive at once in your scene, but you can see the general idea here. I'll wait till wave 40 so it'll spawn the boss, and you can see that it's got scoring built in, so it automatically increases the score every time an enemy is destroyed based on the wave. All those parameters are super easy to set up. So we got our boss coming up here, and hey, we've got the boss. So this system is similar to my generic EnemySpawner system. It's just a significantly more complex, basically version of that. And it doesn't rely on spawners. So the only thing you need to pull into the map here is this WaveManager. If we go into our blueprints here, we'll see it. It's a WaveManager. It's the only thing you need to pull into the map. I already have one here, so I'm going to show you this one. If we come down here into our details panel, we can see that we have wave detail struct, spawner detail struct, and time, and a few other safety values here, right? So let's go over some of those. We have our wave details, which is the total enemies. This is basically what you're going to set up to start it all off. So if I set this to 10, 0, the boolean for spawn only boss is if you're going to use boss waves, and you only want to spawn the boss in the wave, click this. If you want to spawn the boss after you spawn however many enemies are supposed to be in the wave, go ahead and leave that unclicked. You don't need to set up the boss class or active pads. Those will set themselves up in the blueprints, which I'll show in a second. Same thing here in spawner details. Enemy classes, use weights, and weights are all going to be tied to these data tables I have set up for you, these examples. You're going to want to do this differently based on, whatever you're using this for, but I did set up some simple examples up to round 21 of just enemies that are spawning and the weights that we're using, just to show how you might set that up. Okay, so that's our spawner details. We don't need to set the enemy classes by default, the use weights, or the weights. Spawn interval, this is how long it's going to take for each enemy to, before each enemy, like when you spawn one enemy, it's going to wait 1 second, or half a second, or 1/10 of a second, or 5 seconds if you want, to spawn the next enemy in. Maximum alive, this is how many enemies can be alive at any given time, on your map, right? On your map. So that's that. Allow overlap is going to allow the enemies to spawn on top of each other. So these spawn pads here have a collision sphere. So if the enemy has not left the collision sphere yet, it will look for another spawn pad. And if there are no spawn pads, it won't spawn them. But if you allow the overlap, it will. All right, it'll force spawn them. So allow overspawn, that's going to be to allow more enemies than your total enemies to spawn into the map. So if I allow overspawn here with 10, it'll spawn up to 20 enemies, and have them all on the map. But then once you kill the 10 enemies or destroy them, it will end the wave, right? Like you normally would. Time. This is the time between waves. So if you want to set this to 60 or 90 or whatever you want, I have it set to 3 because we're kind of going through this real fast. I'm going to allow overspawn here, and I'm actually going to finish this. So we go into our safety here. These are the safety settings so that you don't brick your rig or anyone else's rig. So we have our maximum allowed to pool. This is how many total enemies can be in the pool, just in total. So if you reach around 5,000, still only 200 enemies can ever be pooled because that's what you have the maximum pool. And if you go into the blueprints for the spawner, you can see that it increments based on the wave. So this is kind of important. Otherwise, you would have like 55,000 enemies pooled. Which is absurd. You don't need that. You're going to want to set this based on how many polys your actors have, how detailed your map is, all that stuff, kind of how your gameplay is going to be set up. Our total enemies multiplier. So this is these multiplier values here are the increase amount per wave. So this is multiplied by the wave. You see my little tooltip, how much to increase total enemies each round, multiplied by the wave and added to the default or the last, whichever was most relevant. So that's that. So my total enemies here would be 10 times 0.14 plus the level, so it'll add a 1. Just to keep that in mind. Maximum alive allowed. This is also to prevent runaway with the maximum alive allowed increaser here. This is never going to, like, if you only have 200 here and you have 250 here, that's bad. You should keep this around the same probably as the pooled. Our minimum spawn interval, you need to keep this above 0. If it's 0, then your spawner is going to break. This has to be any value above 0. And our interval decrease, which is the decrease amount to your spawn interval per wave, which I've set to 0.01. You can set this to 0 if you just want it to be the same 1 second, between spawn intervals, but completely up to you. Just make sure that this minimum spawn interval is not 0. Okay. So pretty simple there, easy to set up. Like I said, we're going to go into the enemy here, the base enemy class, which is a character class. I'm going to set this to something like 2. That way we can actually spawn our enemies, but it's set to 2.5. That way we can actually spawn our enemies. Enemy isn't really included here, but I have the basic pooling function set up, basic damage and basic death. That way we can see that the death is setting them inactive. It's not destroying the actor. It's setting all the params on active and inactive, and kind of handling all that. And I have this debug death event all set up. That way when we press play here, they do die. We see, wave 1 enemies 11, max alive 20. Maybe I should have set the spawn interval a little bit higher. They're going to die before I ever hit overspawn. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we can see that they're going to keep spawning up to 20. And eventually they will die. Maybe I set that a little bit too high there. So we can see our scores going down. Enemies are still spawning because it's going to keep spawning, like I said, up until the max alive. But when we hit this 10th enemy here, they're all going to despawn, and that's going to be the end of the wave. So pretty simple there, right? Hopefully I explained that well enough for you to be able to use this. Again, these are all character class. That way they can have movement and pawn sensing. I just added this example mesh in here. You can delete that and put in your actual character mesh. So we're going to go into the WaveManager. This WaveManager is the main component here, right? This is the whole pretty much kit and cadoodle. And you can see it's doing a lot of stuff here. I'm not going to go over every single thing in this video. But I did add helpful examples here of maybe differences you can make, things you can change, what you want to do here. But basically it comes in here, initializes, which sets up your PadManager and your EnemySpawner. You don't have to put those in the map. It's automatically going to generate them. And then does a bunch of tying to events which get triggered from the other actors, like when they die, handles all that stuff, does the wave increments. All this is nice, commented out, so that you can come in here, mod it, adjust it, do whatever you want. The only thing I want to really go over here is the handle wave increase. So when I make my game, which I'm using this exact same wave spawner system, I'm not pretty much going to use any of this. I'm just going to use my data tables, and I'm going to go through the arduous process of setting up each and every level that I want for my data tables. I'll show you those real quick. So we come in here, we come into our structs, right? Our wave details, spawner details, we went over those in the spawn manager, and those are the main structures that are being used. Our data table examples, these are the ones I actually used in the code. These are just getting pads per level and enemies per level. Pretty simple here, getting the pads you want to use and getting the enemies you want to use per level. And that's just to prevent me from having to go in and type a bunch of stuff and get a bunch of randoms. You can do whatever you want there. I've got examples in the code. But for my example here, I just made a data table straight from each of these structs, and basically what I'm going to do here, as you can see in my game, is just hard code everything into the structures. I didn't do that in the example because I want to, you probably want to be able to use a lot of this, and eventually this is going to clam up. So if you have like 100 rows and somehow somebody makes it to wave 101, you're going to have issues. which we do run into here, but that's why we have this checked to see if it's over 21. That's all I set up in the examples. And if it's over 21, it just gets row 21 and sets the parameters based on that. So that's kind of how you would handle that. I just think that this way will be easier for me since I'm going to have a lot of different bosses. I'm going to be doing a lot of different stuff each wave, resetting my weights each wave. So that's kind of how that's going to work. Here we can see everything's kind of getting increased based on the parameters. So whatever you want to do, if you don't want to use all this complicated gobbledygook, you can just delete that and plug that straight in, and it should work fine. Okay. So that's more or less what I'm going to explain here, what's going on. You can kind of go through everything and see for yourself where the values are being set up, right? What's going on here, where everything's being printed, where you can grab your values to set up your widgets, all that good stuff. Big truck rolling by outside. So we also have our enemy spawner. This is a little important. Okay, whoops. I guess I'm in the function here. This is a little important. This handles the pooling and spawning of the enemies. So like I said, we are pooling enemies. So it's going to prep the pool based on the amount pooled, see if the amount pooled is less than the maximum pool size. And if it's not, yeah, so you don't break out. It's going to pool up the enemies and set up the events, you know, stuff like that. You can come in here and kind of view all this stuff however you want. Mod it, learn from it. Again, whatever you want with it. So everything's nice and commented out here. All of the functions have their respective comments. Most of them are pretty simple, but there are a few that are a little complicated. So that is the enemy spawner. Let's go over the pads real quick, and then I'm going to show a few things in example while we are running the game. So with our spawner pads here, basically you're going to want to drag these out on the map and set them up to control where the enemies are going to spawn. Obviously your map's probably not going to be a single plane, right? So we have this enemy spawner here, and if we go into the defaults, we have 3 values. Kept this nice and simple. Use, this doesn't matter too much. We're going to set this during runtime with the direction value. Sphere radius, so this is how pretty much big you want that collision sphere to be to allow overlap. So if you like really don't want enemies spawning next to each other, you can make it pretty big. Or you can make it like super tiny. Kind of up to you there. So if you're doing like top down with like 500 enemies, they're all 50 poly meshes, you're probably just going to want to disable that completely. And we have our direction values, so you can set this up to whatever you want. In my examples here, I used, if I can click it, I used north, south, east, and west as directions, and that's how I'm setting it. And you could see that in the data table here. It's part of why I set this pads per level up separately. You see that we're using like north for waves 1 through 9. After that, we're using north and east, so you're just going to add the array value for what you want to use. And it's going to handle all that. So you can add as many directions, as many locations as you want. So if you want to add like a stockyard or a warehouse, whatever you want to do here, just make sure that you get the exact direction name that you used copied into the data table, or however you want to handle that. So pretty simple there. There was one more thing I wanted to go over here, and that is the boss spawner. I can't remember which one I used. I think I used this one. So if you're setting up bosses, boss spawner does work a little bit differently. You're going to want to go into the details here, search for tags, and add a tag called BossPad. I'll show you how to do that real quick. So we can come in here, we see that this new one I just put in the map doesn't have a tag. Add a tag, and we're going to add exactly BossPad. Now you can change this in the code if you want. You can just search for BossPad and just pull up all the references, but BossPad, pretty easy to use. You can also set up a few different checksums there to handle that. Let me show you where that is real quick. And with the PadManager, this component basically is just a I didn't want to kind of leave this in the other stuff, so it's basically just manages all the pads when you call this here to manage all the pads. It's actually this here, set up spawn pads. Boom, calls it from right there. So that is that, right? That's going to get our active pads. It's going to set up our spawn pads. I wanted to show you, that's right, set up boss pad. So if it is a boss wave here, we can see we're branching out, we're checking, we're seeing if it's a boss pad. We want to set up the boss pad in the PadManager. So if you want to use parameters here like north, south, east, or west, you're going to want to run a direction and basically check the direction here. So you're going to run a for each and get direction and whatever direction you wanted to spawn the boss at. It's pretty much the exact same logic as you'll see up here and pretty much in the rest. By the way, boss pads get excluded. That's how you can exclude things with tags if you want to do some other exclusions. And I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go over here. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave them down in the comments. I've got some extra functions and extra stuff in here just to kind of help you understand the system a little bit better and mod it out as you need it. It's not overly complicated, should be pretty universal for you to do. So I'm going to set a few things up here, that way we can get that out of here. Let's do it the hard way. So basically since we have the pooled enemies, maybe I'll show that actually. So we have the pooled enemies, right? Right now we have 19 in the pool because 20 alive minus 1, 0, so 20 alive. So you can see that it's all cones. That's all we have in the first 4 waves is cones. Well, now we're going to be spawning in cubes as well. So we didn't quite roll cube here because that's a very low check, but we did roll cube when we wanted to spawn the enemies. So I have a checksum built in that will force spawn cubes added to the pool. So now the next wave, right, you're not actually going to add any more enemies to the pool before the wave. There's already enough enemies in the wave to satisfy the pool requirements, but there just wasn't enough cubes, and you rolled a cube. So it's going to spawn that cube at runtime. It's going to add it to the wave, and you're going to get that little red. This is all print strings and debug strings. But you're going to get that little red there, and you know, it's going to show you that the cube spawned, and it handled that, and now the cube is in the pool. So now the next time a cube needs to get spawned, it will handle that cube spawn. Now that little delay there isn't lag, it's the last 2 enemies because there's 20 in it. There's only 15 spawn pads. So you can see here it's doing it again, and that's because we added cylinders. Yeah, we added cylinders in at wave 10, right? So that's going to continue on pretty much all the way up to 21. 21, I set the weights to be very heavy for spheres, so it's going to do it a lot on round 21, and then pretty much never again. Doop. And again, there's only 15 on each side, so 15, 30, you know, 60. Only 60 enemies can even spawn at once since I don't have them moving forward or over spawning, you know? So that's why we have that delay there, because another round of enemies has spawned and they just so happen to spawn on the same pads in the same arrangement. It takes them a little while to bleed out. So yeah, that is our generic wave system. If you pick this up, I hope you like it. I hope this explainer video helps you to understand kind of what's going on here, and basically how to use it. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them here, and I will do my best to reach out and help you out with whatever you need. I should also mention I added my EasyPrintMacros. This is pretty much what I use for everything. It's just print strings put in macros. Anyway, thanks for watching.